Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to tonight's conversation starring the Office of Financial Aid at U of M. We're really happy that you joined us tonight. I am Rachel Egelhoff. I am the MFamily Program Manager, and my office is within the Dean of Students office on campus, and we are located in the Union. So I am a person that works both with families and students. Students are able to walk in Monday through Friday from 8 to 5 and speak with someone who is on call if they're having any issues on campus or have any questions, need resources for things that they're unable to find. We are there to support them. They can also call the Dean of Students office and we can help walk them through any questions that they have. Again, finding resources, point them in the right direction. We will go through some contact information at the end, so you'll have that. A couple of housekeeping items. Please use the Q&A function to submit any questions to our moderators tonight. We will compile the questions at the end of the presentation, and we will answer as many of those questions as we can tonight. So again, use that Q&A feature during the presentation. If you want to hold off and wait until the end of the presentation to see if your question is covered, that would be great. And then after the presentation, we will compile as many of the questions that were answered as we can and email those out to the people who have registered for this conversation tonight. We will also make available the video of the presentation, which is on our YouTube channel. And I can add that in the webinar as we move through the night. This will be about an hour-long presentation. So I have myself and my colleague Gabby, who is going to be helping us compile the question and answers to more efficiently go through those at the end of the presentation. And I'm going to turn it over to Anna Miller, who is our staff member at U of M from the Office of Financial Aid, to start with her presentation. Thank you all for joining us. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much, Rachel. Let me get my presentation up and hopefully shared with you all. I wasn't able to get my video on. I suppose you'll be watching the presentation and not me anyways. But let's make sure I'm on the correct screen. All right. Well, thank you all very much for joining, as I said, especially on a Tuesday evening, and we appreciate your time and sharing it with us. I do want to start by giving a quick apology in case you hear any strange sounds. My husband is a musician and he's teaching a bass lesson right now. It is on the other level of the house, and I'm using my headset in hopes that it muffles as much as possible, but I just wanted to put that out there. If you hear anything weird, it is some bass that you might hear. So moving along, let's take a look at what we're going to be discussing this evening. We're hoping just to hit on a few different things that you might be wondering about in terms of financial aid. And maybe there might also be some material in here that you didn't know to even wonder about or ask about, but is potentially relevant to future plans and future planning for financial aid. So we're going to talk about how to apply for aid, some tips on scholarships, some things to know about spring summer financial aid, kind of goes hand in hand in some cases with off-campus housing. And then finally, a little bit of a different topic, but no less important, is loan repayment. So let's jump right in. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is probably first and foremost on a lot of your minds. And that's how to apply for financial aid. It is something that you need to do every year. And in order to do that, every year that you continue, you have to submit a new FAFSA. The FAFSA is specific to each school year. So the school year always begins in the fall, and the FAFSA then is good for the fall, the winter, and the spring summer semester. And then you do a new one before every fall. For our continuing students, the deadline to submit that FAFSA is May 1st. And I don't want anybody to panic when you see that, specifically with all of the challenges that are going on with the FAFSA for this year in particular. We know that the 24-25 FAFSA has not had a smooth rollout from the federal government, and that there are a lot of students who just have not been able to submit it yet, despite their best efforts. We're well aware of that. So please don't panic if that's happening to you. We know that. Just keep us up to date and we can certainly work with you. We wouldn't expect you to do something that isn't physically possible, but just do your best to work on that. And if you haven't gotten it started yet, certainly, log in and take a look so that you can get in there and hopefully have all of your ducks in a row by that May 1st deadline. The FAFSA is the application for federal aid. So if the students want to be considered for any federal need-based grants, work study, or student loans, the FAFSA is required for that. Now, the next thing you'll see here is regarding the CSS profile, and that's a separate financial aid application that U of M uses, and that only needs to be done once in the student's career. So if you already did the CSS profile in the entering year, you do not need to do that again. If you never did it, we certainly recommend that you do it. It's just a good idea to have that in the system so that you're guaranteeing that the student is being considered for all potential sources of financial aid, but just once, and then that one does not need to continue being done every year. The CSS profile opens up eligibility for need-based grants from the university. So if the student never completed a CSS profile, they would never be considered for any of those University of Michigan grants or the Go Blue Guarantee. Those are just a couple of the big ones that we have in terms of that need-based funding that comes directly from U of M. So both applications for the 24-25 school year will be based on 2022 tax information, which you probably saw if you were able to get in and complete that already. Again, we realize that 2 years prior on taxes is not necessarily reflective of the current financial situation for some families. And if that's ever the case for you, we encourage you to contact our office. And that's any year, even in the future. If you down the road, you've done the FAFSA and you're like, that just isn't right anymore. Something has drastically changed. We've retired, we've lost a job, we've gotten a different job, whatever the case may be, please do contact our office. For the current year, with the timing of that and the way that things are going with the really late delivery of FAFSA information to schools, we are recommending that you wait until your student receives their official aid notice from us before reaching out, but certainly do reach out at that point. And we'd be happy to talk through that process with you of what type of documentation we might be looking for in order to do a reevaluation of financial aid eligibility based on more current circumstances. Okay, next thing up is scholarships. And we get a lot of questions about scholarships year round, but particularly coming into each academic year. A lot of students are wanting to know, how do I get scholarships? And that makes sense because scholarships are certainly one of the more desirable sources of financial aid. And the thing to kind of keep in mind that's a little bit unique with the University of Michigan is that scholarships are very decentralized at U of M. And there are actually relatively few of them that are managed through our office, through the Office of Financial Aid. We don't really have a kind of one-stop shop, so to speak, office on campus that can help with all scholarships. And there are just so many of them out there. So it really is important to do a little bit of research and just to be aware of the different sources of various scholarships. So a few tips for you here. The first thing you see is something called My Scholarship Profile. And this is available in Wolverine Access. This shows where to find it under Campus Finances. And My Scholarship Profile helps match up students with our donor-based scholarships. A lot of times when donors establish a scholarship fund, they are aiming to help a certain population of student. And so filling out that My Scholarship Profile asks some pretty specific, maybe seem like strange questions, just to try to help match students up with the criteria from those different donors and who they're wanting to assist with their funds. If anything changes, it doesn't hurt to go in there and just kind of make sure it's still up to date every year. The next thing, and really I think the main thing that people are normally thinking of when they're asking about scholarships and thinking about scholarships are merit scholarships. And merit scholarships come from the departments, from those different colleges on campus. So LSA has their own scholarships office, engineering has their own scholarships office. And they all have their own kind of pools of money that they manage on their own. And there's different criteria and different ways that they award those funds, different things that they're looking for. So for any questions about those departmental scholarships, it really is always best practice to reach out directly to the college that you're in, and they can help you navigate that process. What I will say is that there are potentially different scholarship opportunities through the colleges for continuing students versus entering students. So even if you didn't receive a scholarship in the entering year, a merit scholarship from the department, certainly still a good idea to check back in with the department and see if there are any potential scholarship opportunities for continuing students that maybe you didn't receive in your first year, but now there are different things that you can apply for. So certainly speak with your college about that. And again, they really are specific. And so you want to make sure that you're talking to the department that you're actually in. And then finally, there are external scholarships, and these are from sources outside the university. And there are many, many, many of them out there, but they can be a little bit challenging to find and to apply for. Most of them involve an essay, and they take a little bit of work to actually submit that application and get everything in order for it. I do think it's worth the time if you're trying to go that route. You might apply for 10 or 15 and then end up getting maybe 1 or 2 of the scholarships. But still, if that's still 1 or 2 scholarships that you have that can help chip away at those costs. So it's definitely worthwhile. We do have a list on our financial aid homepage of some search engines for outside scholarships that we know to be legitimate. And that's important because there are potentially some scholarship sites out there that are not quite above board. You should definitely never pay money for a scholarship service. You should always be using something that's free to use and to navigate. And it's really just serving as a tool to help kind of funnel through the different criteria that might apply and find scholarship opportunities that match up with that. You can also always just check out your hometown, look at the local clubs, the Elks Club, the Kiwanis Club, things like that, any organizations to see if they have any scholarships that they provide to university students. We do see quite a few students who receive scholarships from those types of organizations. So again, another option out there to pursue in terms of trying to find those external scholarships. Okay, so next we're gonna move over to spring summer financial aid. And spring summer is a very beautiful time in Ann Arbor, as you can see from the photo here, but it is an optional semester. So not all students take spring summer classes, and they don't have to, that's perfectly fine. But because of that, financial aid is not offered upfront for spring summer the same way that it is for the fall and the winter semesters. So for spring summer financial aid packages, we don't create those until after the student is actually enrolled in their spring summer classes. And when we do that, it's actually based on how many credits the student is enrolled in. So it's a little bit more specific than fall and winter aid packages, which kind of default to the full-time aid offers, recognizing that a lot of students don't attend full-time in spring summer, even if they are attending. Now, really important, what you see here is that students do have to be at least half-time in order to qualify for financial aid. And this is not just in spring summer, this is any semester, but I want to point out that it is the same in spring summer, where students do have to be at least half-time, which for undergraduate students is 6 credits, for graduate students, it's 4 credits, in order just to get any amount of aid at all. The thing that's a little bit tricky about spring summer is that there are different modules or sessions of classes. There's a spring mini term, which is May and June. There's a summer mini term, which is July and August. And then there's the combined spring summer semester, which spans that entire 4-month period of May through August. And students can take classes that might be in any one of those 3 places. And really the key is just making sure that there is half-time enrollment established across those 3 options in totality. So between spring, summer, and spring summer, the student does need to be enrolled at least half-time in order to qualify. I will say as well, any enrollment changes that your student might make to their schedule can cause retroactive changes to financial aid eligibility. And I know that students are a bit more likely to make changes to their schedule in spring, summer, kind of trying things out and see what works. But just keep in mind that if you're doing that, that any changes can make a change, and even more because of the way that the classes are split between those mini terms, and therefore the financial aid is split between those mini terms. So anytime there's questions about that, please do reach out to our office. We're happy to help with that, but it's always better to ask first and to know what might happen when those schedule changes are being considered. And then finally, if you are using any Parent Plus loans, you'll need to submit a new application for the spring summer semester. There's not a way at the beginning of the school year, if you applied for fall and or winter, to indicate that you also wanted to do spring summer. So if you want a Plus loan, it's not automatic. You do need to apply. That application is open now. It's studentaid.gov. It opened a couple weeks ago for the spring summer semester, so you can apply, but we won't start processing those applications until after registration has opened and we're actually putting together those financial aid packages for spring summer. For private loans, if you are using those and going that route, you would just need to talk to your servicer, whoever you're getting that private loan from, to see what they need from you in order to do a new application for the spring summer semester. All right, so a lot of students at this time of the year are thinking about and are asking us about living off campus as they're starting to make their plans either for spring, summer, or for the upcoming school year. And a couple of things to point out here. Financial aid eligibility does not change, regardless of whether you're on or off campus. You're eligible for the same amount of financial aid either way. What does change is the way that you are billed. So when you live in the dorms, you're charged directly by the university for your housing and meals, as well as your tuition. And that means that when your financial aid comes in, it pays directly towards those housing charges. If you live off campus, the university is not charging you for housing and meals. We don't know what your housing and meals cost. Your landlord is the one charging you your rent, and you're either grocery shopping and cooking your meals or perhaps still getting the meal plan, but you're not being charged for those things on your bill in the same way. So when the financial aid is applied to the bill, still the same amount of financial aid, but the bill is less because the bill is not going to include any housing or meal expenses. And so there could be potentially more money left over, and whatever amount of financial aid is left over after the bill is paid gets sent to the student as a refund check. The refund is typically a one lump sum each semester, and it is meant to be used towards living expenses, and it really needs to be managed and budgeted throughout the semester for those living expenses. So for spring, summer, for example, if your student gets a refund in May, perhaps they need to make that last for those entire 4 months. Or in fall, if they receive that refund in late August or early September, that needs to last all the way through until the next financial aid payment in early January. So it really takes a little bit more kind of management and planning of funding if you are going to be living off campus. Another thing to note is that students are only eligible for financial aid during semesters that they're actually enrolled in classes. So if your student is only taking fall and winter classes, for example, and not spring summer classes, they're not eligible for financial aid in the spring summer. They're only eligible for those 8 months worth of aid from September through April. The thing is, a lot of leases, particularly in Ann Arbor, are 12-month leases. So if you do have a 12-month lease, again, there's a little bit of planning needed, a little bit of forward thought needed to think about how to pay for living expenses during that time, because financial aid won't be an option during that time if the student isn't enrolled. What you see here in the graphic is a worksheet that we have available on our website, this off-campus resource worksheet. And it does help just with some budgeting. It helps students kind of break down and outline all of the potential expenses that they're going to have living off campus. And then another section to outline all of the sources of financial aid that they know they're going to have, and then to compare those two things to see how much of their housing expenses will be potentially covered by financial aid. So that is a helpful tool. And if you're ever looking at this and not quite sure how to use it or what to make of it, you can always drop by our office for advising, and we can work through it with you as well there. Okay, finally, this really is kind of looking ahead a little bit more to the future, but it really is never too early to start thinking about loan repayment if you do have any loans, either federal or private, either way. For federal loans, um, you can find out who your loan servicer is at studentaid.gov. And that really is the home of all things for federal financial aid. So when in doubt, start at studentaid.gov. But you can log in there and find out who your loan servicer is. And it's important to know that because your loan servicer is the company that is managing the repayment of those student loans. U of M is just kind of the middle person to loans. It's the government's money. And then it's the loan servicers who help the borrowers pay that money back. We're just the ones who kind of get the money and put it towards the account. So definitely important to be in touch with your servicer. And I guess, first of all, just find out who they are if you don't know. Any questions about repayment will always be with your servicer. If you're able to, it's not required, but if you're able to, paying the interest on any unsubsidized loans that you have can help reduce the total amount of debt that you're going to have down the road. Interest on those loans is compound interest. And so if it's not being paid while the student is in school, it is getting tacked onto that principal, and then you're accruing interest on interest. So it really can help you in future. You will be grateful if you are able to do that now to make that payment. It's the same for Parent Plus loans. Those are also unsubsidized. So same thing applies there. If you're ever not sure how to set that up or what amount that maybe should be in order to make that interest payment, again, that'd be something to talk to your loan servicer about. And there's no penalty for paying early. They will be happy to help you with that and help you get that set up and figure out the correct amount. You also then want to kind of keep in mind that if you are going to be going on to graduate school, that might require more borrowing and perhaps inform decisions that you're going to make now about loan borrowing. If you are unsure of how much you have borrowed from your loans at this point, you can see your entire borrowing history at studentaid.gov. It's another really helpful tool of that website. And it really is good for making those informed decisions about grad school. Another tool I should say that's available at studentaid.gov are some repayment estimators. If you haven't checked those out, I recommend that. And then there are some options out there for income-based repayment. The most recent of those is the SAVE repayment plan that just came about within the past year or so. And it actually is quite a good income-based repayment plan, I would say. It's more generous than the previous ones that were out there as options in terms of how much income is protected in their calculations before then determining the discretionary income that could be used to repay loans. If you're ever struggling at any point in the future with paying back your loans, and whatever, no matter why or what the situation is, it's always a good idea to talk to your servicer. I know it can seem daunting to do that, but they are there to help you. And ultimately they are wanting to work with you to make sure that they do get their money back at some point. And they might be able to offer options for things like deferment or forbearance. And so definitely reach out to them if you ever are struggling, and don't hesitate to work that through with them. All right, so that was kind of a hodgepodge of topics, I realize. If you have any questions in the future, this is our office contact information. I will also say that we are available for in-person drop-in advising Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 4:45 p.m. The exception is Thursday mornings. Our office doesn't open until 10, but no appointment needed for that. Drop in anytime in person. We are on the second floor of the Student Activities Building, if you've not visited us before. We also do have Zoom advising, and that is by appointment. And you can set that up through live chat on our website. You can also see our phone number here. Generally, if you're calling, if you can swing it, depending on your own schedule and perhaps your time zone, normally earlier in the day is better, particularly at our busy times of the year, just in terms of being able to actually get in and speak with a representative. But we are happy to talk with you for any questions that you have. That is what we're there for. We're there to try to help and support and help make the process of navigating financial aid a bit easier, because we realize it can be definitely challenging even in the best of years, and particularly with this year and the kind of things that have been happening with the FAFSA, we know that there might be even more questions. So please don't hesitate to reach out. So thank you all for that. I believe we have plenty of time still for questions, if there are any. Looks like there are some.
We are going to give our colleague Gabby just a minute to get ready and compile some of these questions. So Anna, if you're willing to stop sharing your screen for a minute, I'm going to share mine. And I just want to give you some additional contact information for my office, which is the Dean of Students office for financial aid, and also a QR code to join the MFamily portal if you haven't. I know that most of you have come to this presentation by way of the MFamily portal and receiving the announcement yesterday. The portal functions so that we post stories or articles almost every day. We post new content on the MFamily portal. And the way that the portal works is typically that we post portal content. You would log into the portal as a member and you would view that content daily, every other day, whenever works for you. And then on a weekly, biweekly, or monthly basis, whatever you chose when you joined the portal, you'll receive a digest of the most looked at topics, the most viewed, and that'll come directly to your email. So if you're interested in what might be going on, what's happening on campus, what information might be relevant for families, it would be great to join that MFamily portal, and the QR code is there. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, Gabby and I are both located in the Dean of Students office, and the information is there. We do accept walk-ins between 8 and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and that your student can always call or email and get in touch with someone as well. And then again, here's the Office of Financial Aid information that you can use to contact financial aid. I do recommend that if you have specific questions, very specific to your student's situation, specific to a unique college, that you do contact that college or program or the Office of Financial Aid with any questions, because they may be more specific to that college or program and not something that we could answer here tonight. But with that in mind, I'm going to let Gabby and Anna take it away. Gabby's going to compile the questions and hand them off to Anna so that we can hopefully get through them.
Thanks, Rachel. Hi, everyone. My name is Gabby. Like Rachel said, I am one of her colleagues in the Dean of Students office. Thank you for your patience ahead of time as we talk about these questions, because there's a lot coming in at the moment, but I will try to, find questions that are being repeated to ask Anna. And then, we'll just be considerate of time. So we have about 25 minutes or so for some questions. Anna, one of the first questions I have for you is, if there is, what is the maximum federal aid per year that a student can receive?
Okay, that is a good question. And the answer is really that it depends on your FAFSA. But just very generally speaking, in terms of the types of federal aid that are out there, there are federal grants. The maximum potential amount for the federal Pell Grant is just over $7,400 for the school year. There's an additional federal grant called SEOG. It's a supplemental grant. That's another potential $1,500. There is the option and the possibility from the FAFSA for work study. Work study is up to a maximum of potentially $3,100. And then student loans are capped per grade level. So dependent freshmen can borrow up to $5,500 per school year. Dependent sophomores can borrow up to $6,500. And then juniors and seniors can borrow up to $7,500. So there's kind of maximums within the different types of financial aid that are out there. Parent Plus loans, which are also federal, don't have a maximum other than the student's cost of attendance minus other financial aid. So that really is the gap filler. if there's costs that aren't being met with that other aid, then that plus loan is an option to fill in.
That's great. Thank you, Anna. Let's see. Next, we have a couple of questions from folks who share either they have more than one student attending U of M or they have more than one student in college. Are there additional financial aid opportunities because of that, or are they eligible for more, or can you speak to what options they have, if any?
Sure. And I know that this is probably, producing some anxiety for a lot of families because of the changes made to the 24-25 FAFSA, where that number in college is no longer part of the calculation. Having said that, institutional funding, so those need-based grants that are coming from the university as a result of the CSS profile, will still be considering number in college. And that number in college will be reported on the CSS profile. If it ever changes, if the profile that we have on file is no longer accurate in terms of the number in college, to contact our office, we can talk through the process of appealing to make that update, but we will be using the number in college, which is still asked on the profile, and we will be using that for grants from the university. So hopefully that alleviates at least a little bit of the fears, which are real, and we completely understand that.
Great. Thank you, Anna. So at the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned that if families have a significant change, that they can, contact your office to take that into account. And the FAFSA is, you do that once per academic year, whereas the CSS profile you do once per the student's career. Say that there is a change in the family situation. Can they update that CSS profile, or is it the same from when they initially filled it out at the beginning of their time here?
The family can't update the CSS profile, and I don't recommend going in and doing a new one, even though it's possible to do a new one, because we typically won't look at it, and there is a small cost associated with the CSS profile. So I don't recommend doing that. But when you reach out to us and we are working through this process with you for those changes of income, we're going to gather documentation of the more current income. So it might be a more recent tax return, or it might be pay stubs or unemployment letters, whatever the case may be. And we're going to take all of that together. And not only are we going to consider any potential changes to federal aid eligibility, so we'll update the FAFSA for federal aid, but we also will consider students for one-time emergency grant funding from the university. And that is something that you need to do each year. But if your student is awarded that funding through that process, it could potentially be more grants on top of that federal aid, where we wouldn't necessarily change the CSS profile, but we are capturing that change in income and hopefully helping to alleviate that kind of increased financial burden for your family by offering, like I said, that one-time block grant. It is potentially up to $10,000 per school year. And it's not always that full amount, depending on changes we're able to make, but that is out there, and it is something that we will consider as part of that process.
Alrighty. The next question I have for you is about financial aid for international students, if any are available. We had one person specifically mentioned they're from Canada. So can you just speak to generally what's available for international students?
Sure. Unfortunately, there isn't a whole lot available, at least not through our office. There are some private loan servicers that do borrow, or I should say loan to international students. And we have a tool on our website called the Fast Choice tool that helps filter. And that is one of the criteria you can put in to help find private loans. Obviously, loans are not the best option that anybody is wanting. I would certainly recommend in that case still talking to the department, because again, that merit scholarship funding is coming from the department rather than our office. So definitely check in with them, check in with the International Center, and they have some resources there available as well.
Alrighty, fantastic. This question is from a family of an incoming student next fall, and they ask, when do you estimate that you'll be able to provide the financial aid packages for these students?
You can't see me, but I'm smiling and chuckling a little. That is the $1 million question right now. So we have started sending out estimated aid packages based on only the CSS profile right now for students who we've received that from, but we don't have any FAFSA data yet, just like no college in the country has any FAFSA data yet. The latest that we've heard from the government is that they're going to deliver that information to schools hopefully by mid-March. And then with that timing, there's still work to do once we load that information into our system. So honestly, it's probably looking like early April, late March, early April to actually get an official notice that reflects the FAFSA. And that is unfortunately going to be the case at pretty much every school in the country. You know, like I said, we were able to send out those estimates based on the profile, but it's just a really unfortunate situation with the FAFSA this year and the way that the timing of that all is working out and when we will have that information. So I know it's going to be kind of cutting it close, but we're hoping optimistic as long as nothing changes and we still get the FAFSA when they say we're going to, hopefully by end of March or beginning of April.
Thank you. Let's see. Another question about what's available for graduate students. We had some posts asking if the information in the presentation is applies to both undergrad and graduate students, and what financial aid are graduate students eligible for, if any?
That is a great question. So in terms of federal financial aid, graduate students are eligible for work study and unsubsidized loans. Unfortunately, there are not any federal need-based programs for grad students. So graduate students cannot receive a Pell Grant, for example. They cannot receive subsidized loans. But they do have that work study. And then, like I said, the unsubsidized loan. They can also take PLUS loans. Those PLUS loans are available to parents of undergrads as well as grad students. So PLUS loans can be taken in addition to unsubsidized loans if needed. And then any of the other types of funding, things like scholarships or fellowships or teaching assistant positions, things like that, as a grad student, those are all going to be coming directly from the department. So definitely work with your department on those as well.
Right. Thank you. So say a student begins their career in one college, say LS&A, and they have a scholarship maybe from that school. And if they transfer to another school like engineering or business, do their scholarships transfer over, or what is the logistics and process like that?
So that's definitely something that you would need to work with the colleges on. Those scholarships are coming, like I said, directly from the college. So if it's an LSA scholarship, it's coming from the LSA scholarships office. It's not likely that it would travel, but the other college, maybe, you know, in the example you're transferring to Ross, I think you said Ross might have different scholarships. I'm not quite sure, but that would be kind of managed between those different colleges that you're transferring in between.
We have a couple questions about study abroad, both during a fall or winter term and then during the summer. Is there aid available? Do they have to meet a certain credit requirement if it's in the summer, say 6 credits? Can you just speak to any abroad financial aid or what applies?
Sure. So if the study abroad program is a U of M sponsored study abroad program, meaning that you found it on mCompass, then it is eligible for financial aid. Now, the amount of financial aid might be a little bit different because some study abroad programs have a program fee instead of tuition. And if the program fee is a different amount than tuition, that's going to lend itself to a different amount of financial aid, different eligibility. But it is still eligible, and that's something that our office would process. We have a dedicated study abroad team, as well as a study abroad email address that can help with any of those types of questions. In terms of the enrollment, 6 credits is still required for undergrads, even if it's study abroad, even if it's spring, summer. So that 6 really is the magic number for undergrads in order to remain eligible for aid. If it is a non-U of M program, the student is still going to be eligible for federal financial aid, but there's going to be some extra paperwork needed to do that process to kind of coordinate with the home school that study abroad program is through. And so you would definitely want to work with our office on that.
Thank you. Let's see. So if a student receives financial aid and it's more than what they needed that term, so they potentially could receive a refund, do those funds have to be refunded or can they be applied to a following semester at U of M?
So that is a really good question, and it's going to get a little bit into the weeds. I apologize on kind of what has already been happening on the student account. I'll try to make it, I guess, as simplistic as possible. If there have not been any out-of-pocket payments made to the student account and there is extra financial aid, they will get a refund. There's not a way to opt out of that or to hold the money, so to speak. We are required to refund that to you. And so it is going to be refunded. The student could certainly hang on to it if they needed to and save it for a future semester. That's one option, but we do have to refund that money. If there have been out-of-pocket payments made on the student account and then excess financial aid comes through, rather than refunding, it actually creates a credit. And if it does have that credit on the account, there are a couple of options with it. You can leave the credit. And if you leave the credit, it does just roll forward from semester to semester. So if you had a credit, $5,000 credit in fall, it would go towards those winter charges once winter tuition is assessed. But you don't have to leave it as a credit. If you do think, oh no, I actually do need that money right now, I have some bills to pay, you can contact the billing office and they can release that to you as a refund. So hopefully that wasn't too complex and made sense.
Yes. Okay. Let's see. The next question I have for you, I believe it's about the U of M grant, University of Michigan grant. Does the data that is used to like determine if a student is eligible, is that through the FAFSA or the CSS profile or both?
It is through both. So students do have to complete both applications to be considered for the U of M grant. However, in kind of recognizing the changes to the 24-25 FAFSA and moving forward and the changes with number in college, in terms of the amount of University of Michigan grant, we are going to be basing the amount on the CSS profile, but we do still require both applications just to be done in order to be considered.
Thank you. Let's see, for financial aid for the summer, how do students apply and is the application open for that?
So there's actually not a separate application. Spring summer is the last semester of every school year. So the upcoming spring summer is still part of the 23-24 school year. So as long as you already did your 23-24 FAFSA, then that is all that you need to do for spring summer. And you will automatically be packaged with financial aid after you enroll, just as long as you're in 6 credits. If you never hit 6 credits, you won't get a financial aid package. So you might kind of have a cue that something else is going on there if you're not receiving anything. But yeah, no extra application needed. And we will automatically get that ready for you once you enroll.
Fantastic. Let's see. How can families find out if their student already filled out the CSS profile?
The CSS profile is through the College Board, so you should be able to see record of it there. There also would have been some kind of confirmation email sent from College Board when you completed the profile. When in doubt, if you can't find any of that, you can always just ask us too. You can send us a quick email or phone call and we can certainly check on that for you.
Sounds good. That sounds like the magic answer. Email or for those specific questions.
Yes.
Alrighty, let's see. I'm still looking through some of them. Generally speaking, are scholarships good for all 4 years, or does my student need to reapply each year? And I guess that I'm sure that varies, like depending on the scholarship and what it is, but what general guidance can you say about reapplying every year for scholarships?
That definitely varies depending on the scholarship. And my answer to that is to make sure that you know the terms of your scholarship, because they are going to be vastly different. And there are hundreds and hundreds of different scholarships on campus. And so there's really not one uniform answer to that. There are some that are 4 years, some that aren't. But if you're not sure of what the terms of that scholarship were and you can't find the letter that you received from when you were awarded the scholarship, you would just want to reach out to the source of the scholarship. So if it was from your department, check with your department. If it was from an outside organization, check with them, and they would definitely be able to answer that for you.
Sounds good. We have a couple questions seemingly from our middle-class families in this virtual Zoom space. And they want to know, generally, is there an annual income amount that disqualifies a family from financial aid? Or with all these changes in FAFSA, are there any other ways that middle-class families are being supported by financial aid or ways that they can seek out funding?
Sure. The first thing I'll say is that although the changes to the FAFSA, like I said, have not gone smoothly, they are a result of something called the FAFSA Simplification Act. And I think that was the goal, was to make it more simple. And hopefully once everything is ironed out, I think that will be the result. The other thing that I think is a good thing as a result of that is that there will be more students who are eligible for more aid. More students are going to qualify for the Pell Grant based on the FAFSA than before. So that is a good thing. And that's because the way that the government is calculating that eligibility really is changing, like I said, and it is reaching more families with higher income amounts. So there will be more students qualifying for a Pell Grant. In terms of, specific dollar amounts, that really isn't something that we can easily answer because it's not just income. There's other things that are part of the calculation for both federal aid and institutional aid. There's also questions about assets. There's the household size. Even though we're not looking at the college, there's still the overall household size. There's the state that you live in. There's kind of considerations in those formulas for the cost of living in each state. And so there's lots of factors to it. And so unfortunately, there's really not a way to give a good income cutoff because that's just one piece of the puzzle.
Thank you. See, a good question we have here is, does an outside scholarship my student may receive potentially reduce any financial aid they get through the institution?
You all are asking some great questions. Maybe is the answer. So a student can receive financial aid up to their full cost of attendance. You can think of the cost of attendance like a bucket that can be filled, but once it's filled, it cannot have anything else put in it without overflowing and displacing something else. So if a student already has financial aid that's meeting their full financial need and their full cost of attendance, bringing in additional funds would replace other things. Now, as much as possible, depending on what type of aid a student has, what their specific aid package is comprised of. So this can get specific very quickly, depending on the actual financial aid package. But we do our best within regulation to reduce things like loans and work study first before we would reduce other grants. But yes, if you're already at the full cost, then it can potentially reduce other things.
Generally speaking, if folks received a UMIC grant, can they expect to get that same amount in like the following academic year? Say if like the family situation or other financial situations don't change?
Yeah, I think all things considered, as long as the financial situation isn't drastically changing, then yes, there's reason to think it should be a similar amount of that grant each year. And if for some reason you're seeing that it's not a similar amount, certainly reach out to us when you get that aid notice so we can help you figure out what might be going on.
All right, fantastic. Let's see. How do students put their direct deposit information in for any refunds they could get? Is that through financial aid? Is that through student financial services, or where can they go to input that?
It's through Wolverine Access, and it is not intuitive because it's actually under payroll information, even for students. So you wouldn't think as a student maybe to look there, but it's in Wolverine Access under payroll.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. We have some specific questions, so I'm trying to parse out if there's any general questions we can get from that to help the whole group. So thanks everyone for your patience. Does U of M get notified when students start the CSS profile on College Board and perhaps don't finish it? Or are they only notified when a student finishes it and submitted it?
we only receive the completed applications. We don't get any kind of notice if it's started. So definitely make sure that you're getting that confirmation when you submit it. And then, like I said, at this point, we are sending out estimates based on the CSS profile. If you don't receive that within a week or two of submitting the profile, definitely check back in with us and we can try to help troubleshoot why we might not have received it.
Looks like we have a couple of questions about on-campus jobs, and how, that works with work study. So, one question in particular asked, does an undergraduate student working in a research lab have reduced tuition? I guess, can you generally speak about student employment on campus? If that plays into work study, anything you have to add about that topic generally would be helpful.
Sure. So work study is really unique in terms of financial aid because it does not get applied to the bill. So it does not pay tuition. It doesn't pay any charges on the student account. If a student has a work study job, it's really just like any other job where they're showing up and working and then they're earning biweekly paychecks that go right into the student's pocket. And so it's up to the student to spend it on whatever they need to spend it on. The only difference is that with work study, the government is sending the university some of the money that we're using to pay you. But otherwise, it's just like any other job where you're going to directly receive that paycheck and it will not apply to those tuition charges.
All right. Let's see. We have a question from a family member who asked, can a student use summer aid at another college closer to home? I'm guessing to transfer credits back to U of M. Or would that be aid from that college they are going to in the summer?
It would have to be aid from that other college. So you definitely want to check in with that other college and see if they would be eligible there as a guest student or not.
Alrighty, thank you. Okay. Wrapping up here, a question. Let's see. For returning students and families with more than one college student at one at a different school, will the new single student FAFSA form require follow-up by the student, or will their financial aid package continue as before, assuming that the financial aid situation of the family is unchanged?
Well, for federal aid, it very well could change because that number in college is no longer part of the calculation for the federal aid. But for aid from the University of Michigan, and this does make it specific to University of Michigan, so we can't speak to what other colleges will be doing with their own funding for the sibling who might go somewhere else, it sounds like. But for us, in terms of that University of Michigan grant funding and the other need-based aid, that will continue to be based on the CSS profile. And again, that's a situation where if the CSS profile has the correct number in college, we're using that. We're still considering it. If it doesn't have the correct number in college because a sibling enters school later on, that's something then to contact our office about submitting an appeal just so we can consider that change for you on the profile.
Alrighty here. I had asked a question earlier about estimated financial aid packages for incoming students and how likely that will be, end of March, early April. Does that apply for current students as well, returning students?
That's a good question. It doesn't actually. So continuing students always get their financial aid packages a bit later because our first commitment is to getting our entering students those financial aid packages by May 1st, because we recognize that you need to make that decision by that date. So we do all of our work for our entering students, and then we transition to our continuing students. I will say in most years, it ends up being sometime in midsummer, probably mid-July sometime for when those financial aid packages are actually ready for continuing students. Because then the other thing to consider is that our Board of Regents meets in the summer to vote on the new tuition rates. And we have to make lots of changes to financial aid eligibility and budgets and packages based on those new tuition rates. They normally meet in late June. And so by the time we're able to get all of those updates into our system for our continuing students, it often is around mid-July or so when those financial aid notices are going out.
Thank you, Anna. Let's see here. So a lot of families may already know how expensive it can be for students to live off campus, or they're finding that out now. Folks want to know what the support looks like for off-campus housing, or like in the cost of attendance, how much is budgeted for a student to live off campus, if you can speak to that.
Sure, that's a great question. So there is something called a weighted average, which is just based on average living expenses in the area. We use that weighted average for housing and meals for all students, whether they're in the dorm or off campus. Like I say, we use that for everybody. So amount of financial eligibility is the same for the current year. The 23-24 year that we're in, that amount is just over $7,200 per semester. So a little over $14,000 for 2 semesters, split between fall and winter, is the allotment for housing. So that is, it's almost $2,000 a month. If you divide out that $7,200 by 4 months that the student is getting. The other thing I'll say about that is that any year, if your student is ever paying more than what we have accounted for in their budget, they can work with our office. For fall, we normally start this in October, but they can work with our office to submit documentation of their, their lease, things like that. And if they can show that they are paying more than what we've accounted for in the budget, we can increase their budget based on that.
All righty, thank you. We will have one more question for you, Anna, and I'll remind folks that if you do have questions after this presentation or your question wasn't answered, they will all be compiled, and as best we can, we will answer those and get them out to you. But then financial aid is the best resource for those more specific questions. The last question I have for you is about work study. Are those funds use it or lose it in case a student can't get a work study job? Or if they can't get a job, are they still eligible to get that funding in a different way?
The only thing that could potentially replace work study if it isn't being used would be additional loans or outside scholarships. If there are outside scholarships that come in, that could potentially fill the work study. But yes, otherwise it is just out there as something that the student is eligible for. There's no penalty for not using it because it's not something that we're giving to you up front and then asking you to work off. It's just earned from the bottom up. So if you just never earn the work study, that's fine. You just never earned it. You didn't receive any paychecks. But it wouldn't increase grants or anything like that. If you told us that you weren't going to use it, we could just potentially replace it with a loan.
All righty. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it back to Rachel to close out the presentation, but thank you everyone for your patience as I gather the questions, and I hope it was helpful for you all.
Hi again, everyone. I am going to share my screen with you again for the last slide, which is the QR code. We would greatly appreciate your input. It's about 5 questions and it's a really quick survey. It helps us not only know if this conversation was useful and informative for you, but also if there are other topics that you would like presented throughout the school year. We really do want you to drive our agenda, so we would appreciate your feedback. If you have any questions, we will be putting the conversation on YouTube. We have an MFamily YouTube channel, and I will share that in the chat, the address for that. Also, if you have any questions, please use the emails and websites and phone numbers that were given earlier so that you can contact financial aid directly or the Dean of Students office. That is going to be the best way for you to get answers about specific questions for your student. We appreciate you joining tonight, and we hope you have a wonderful week. Thank you.